Hello and welcome to the Legal & General Just Covered podcast. Today we have a special, and as you know, we talk to advisors about their views and opinions in the intermediary space. My name's Wayne.
And I'm Hazel, and today we're so lucky to be joined by Robin, who is a founder and director of the Consumer Duty Alliance, but also an active chartered financial planner who runs his own financial planning business. So Robin, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's great to have you on. And obviously, we're affiliate members of the Consumer Duty Alliance here at L&G, so we absolutely love what you do. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Alliance and also your involvement in the Vulnerability Taskforce as well?
Sure. It all started with the Financial Vulnerability Taskforce, which was formed about the time that the FCA had launched their consultation on advising vulnerable clients. And that was set up really as a pro bono effort on my part and that of Keith and Tony to try and provide good practice, information and guidance, and trying to influence behaviours around vulnerability. But when it became obvious that the Consumer Duty was going to incorporate vulnerability, in fact, I think vulnerability is mentioned well over 100 times in the Consumer Duty, we decided to evolve the Financial Vulnerability Taskforce into the Consumer Duty Alliance, which is a community interest company, not for profit, and all of the directors work on a pro bono basis, which is really to support the personal finance sector in promoting good practice across the board. It's been sort of jokingly said that we're the sort of implementation team for the implementation team for the Financial Conduct Authority. But we're really there to augment and support the efforts that's going across the market anyway. There are lots of firms that are doing really good work. Providers are supporting very well. The regulator, which has become evident from the talk that Nick Hume did at the recent conference, it became obvious that they're far more engaging and want to collaborate, particularly with smaller firms, I think, in promoting good practice across the sector. So that's essentially what we are as an organisation, not competing with anybody. We're just there to help and support and augment.
Yeah, and that's definitely, we went to the Consumer Duty Alliance event recently, and that definitely shone through the support that you give to small firms and large firms alike, actually. You're not excluding anybody, are you, in the support that you give?
Sure.
And I think that's really, really important, obviously now more than ever with the changes we've had this year, with the thematic review. Now we've had the budget just last week as well at the time of filming. And when we look at financial advice, it's probably going to become more important than ever, really. So how do you deal with your clients within your firm? How do you navigate that? And why do you think financial advice is so important?
Well, I've been in the profession for 33 years, so I've gone through the process of meeting clients in their accumulation phase and supporting them all the way through, making those critical decisions at the retirement point, and then moving into retirement and then into later life. So, anecdotally, the evidence is, there, when they write you a letter or they thank you, for the years of support and guidance and service, it's very gratifying to see. So I know the impact that professional financial planning has on clients, particularly in retirement. Financial planning is both an art and a science. The science is getting the numbers right, but the art is understanding all those intangibles and understanding the client's aspirations, where their concerns are, and flexing the plan to fit their needs. And ultimately, I think people want to be free. They want to be free of obligation to do things they don't want to do, and they want to be free to do the things that they've always wanted to do. And I think that drives happiness, really, and that's what we're all seeking, really, to support clients to get to a place where they can enjoy their life with the reassurance that they're financially sound and they've got a plan that's regularly reviewed. So financial planning is a brilliant profession.
Or happiness planner. That's
exactly.
the other way you could put it.
But just moving on from that, one of the thematic review, because a lot of advisors will sort of glaze over when you mention the Financial Conduct Authority thematic review on retirement. But actually, it's a really interesting document, and the Consumer Duty Alliance created a very simple checklist, and it distills the thematic review down to these are the key things that you need to do. And I read it again on the train to London today, and it just made me realise that anybody that just reads that and applies it to their own day-to-day practice or their businesses, they'll have a really good retirement proposition for their clients. So I would encourage members of the personal finance sector, my peers in the profession, to download a copy. It's free of charge, but it's a really valuable document, and it's a good example of collaboration, I think, between professional financial planners, product providers. It was actually supported by L&G, and also the FCA. The insights that they've given to it through the review itself.
Absolutely. And I remember, at the Consumer Duty Alliance event that we supported, a lot of the advisors would come up to the stand and we'd say to them, we've got this amazing document. It helps you with thematic review. And think, actually, I'm okay, thank you. And the minute they saw it and saw the checklist, how simple it is and how you actually, as you said, if you apply that to your business, you're keeping yourself right, but you're also generating a great proposition for your clients and actually doing the right thing. Touching on the happiness side, what we've done at Legal & General recently is we've interviewed about 3,000 people across society who have retired, and we looked at what happiness means to them in retirement. And what we found in the research is there is a correlation between people who receive financial advice and how happy they end up with their finances. How do you ensure that happens throughout your advice process, and what would you advise others to be thinking of to achieve that client happiness and those goals?
Well, we have a concept of 5 big questions that we ask clients to consider at the point they engage our services. And the questions are, how can I live a better life now whilst planning for the future? How can I support those that I care about? How can I deal with the unexpected? How can I support somebody who's in later life that can't care for themselves? And how do I leave a legacy? So one thing we try and encourage clients to think about is to what is important to them at that stage, but also to recognise there's an interplay. So there may be a presenting issue. I want to plan for retirement, but think about the interplay with perhaps estate planning or supporting their family as a starting point. And then we very much believe that having a robust financial plan that is holistic and recognises that interplay is a really important starting point. So we say to clients, just leave everything as it is. Don't change anything until we've actually created the plan. Unless, of course, there's something urgent to do. There may be a year-end looming. And then it's at that point we take their instructions on any specific implementation, which may be an amendment to their existing pension arrangements or investments. And I think the really valuable part of the process is the ongoing review, and making sure that we're sitting down with clients at least annually, if not more often, and reviewing both their financial planning and also their investments and how things are performing, and recognising that things do change. I mean, a good example recently is a client that I took on 30 years ago, who's a GP, and he's been planning for his retirement, but then very suddenly he's had 3 fairly major health issues that have cropped up, and it's completely changed his thinking, and it means we've now got to flex the plan quite significantly. But because we built in that possibility right at the early stage, then it allows us to work with him and co-produce a new plan. The other thing I think that's worth making the point is that when I joined the profession 33 years ago, to be very sort of crude about it, when you heard of an elderly person, for example, that had a heart attack or a stroke, you weren't surprised if you found out they died. But 33 years later, it's different, and the pattern is that the cash flow is different. So consequently, we encourage clients to think about later life as really an extension of their retirement, because there's a very strong possibility that in later life, maybe in their 80s or 90s, they're going to need additional support. And it's not going to be a cliff edge situation. It's more likely to be that there's a growing frailty or a need for support, and therefore their expenses can go up significantly. we're supporting clients, for example, that are in later life, the latter part of their retirement, and their care fees are £2,500 per week. And they've got to generate that out of after-tax income. So building that into the cash flow, so not seeing later life as a completely separate entity, I think it's really important that financial planners see it as more likely to be an extension of their retirement.
And in terms of that concept, when you're talking about a plan, you focus on that with the clients. When you're explaining that to clients and getting to sort of buy into doing that experience that you've seen over the last 33 years, I presume, is really, really important, because that change in how clients are surviving now when something happens, and that flexibility that you can add into the plan for that.
Yeah, and I think adding personal experience into the mix, I've had the experience of supporting elderly parents, and, my dad has recently passed away and he had dementia, ended his life in a nursing home. So having had that experience, and I'm sat there thinking, well, I'm only 27 years behind my father. And, that could happen to me, and it could also happen to my clients. So clients that are thinking about later life, particularly where they're in their 50s and 60s, and they've perhaps had that experience of supporting their own parents, they are very aware of the cost of later life care, and therefore they're very keen to build that into their planning for retirement.
And linking it back to that checklist that you've got, where you said, I think one of the questions was, how do I balance the today with planning for the future? And I think a lot of people out there is going to be a key thing, because they're thinking of the trials and tribulations of life now, doing what I want to do within the realms of me working at that, but also having one eye on the future. Do you find that conversation does elaborate quite a lot, and do you have to have some challenging conversations maybe in terms of what their outlook looks like, or not, as the case may be?
Yeah, I think at the core of it is having a cash flow forecast and giving the client the tools where they can create different financial scenarios. And it doesn't take much actually to prompt them to start to think about the other aspects of their financial planning. I mean, one of the phrases that I often come out with when I take on a new client is I say, look, financial planning is a bit like a jigsaw. You've walked through the door and you told me that you want to mitigate the inheritance tax liability on your estate, for example. But during the conversation, you've also mentioned that you want to make sure that you retire comfortably and have the lifestyle that you envisage. You've also mentioned you want to support your family. And you've also talked about, your parents, and you may be in the same situation in later life. So it doesn't take much prompting to actually get them to start to realise that there is an interplay between all of those different aspirations. So whilst it starts to look more complex, the way of distilling that complexity down is to give them the tools. And as I say, at the core of that is a cash flow forecast that's very accurate, and let them bench test it. So when they say, well, actually, we want to mitigate inheritance tax, and if I put so much into a trust, they can see what impact it would have on their retirement. So it enriches the decision making. They end up with a much better outcome because they've been able to bench test it.
Yeah, I love the way that you're providing those examples in that where they say, right, okay, if I do this, well, the impact on that would be that.
Yes.
So what do you think? I can see they're buying in. They're almost experiencing it as you're explaining it to them, thinking, okay, maybe I need to think again as they're going through it. And in terms of the Consumer Duty Alliance and the impact on vulnerability, because the client you mentioned then has very quickly became vulnerable. Has that experience you've had with regards to that helped you help others in terms of how they deal with vulnerability, both whether clients vulnerable now or what they could be in the future if something happened to them?
Yeah, I mean, it might seem a simple thing, this, but I think it's significant, and that is the use of language around vulnerability. And where we see the reference to vulnerable clients, it's, nobody wants to be labelled as a vulnerable person. And it actually doesn't help you at all to use that terminology. It's far better to refer to people or clients in vulnerable circumstances and look through that lens of vulnerability with every client that you deal with. I remember I did a seminar for financial planners during COVID, and somebody at the end said, well, a very good talk, Robin, but I don't deal with vulnerable people. And my question back to him was, well, do you only deal with healthy people? And of course, everybody can be vulnerable. Everybody is probably vulnerable at some point in their lives. So it's not about categorizing vulnerability or categorizing vulnerable people. It's it's extending your skills and knowledge and flexing the processes so that you're aware of vulnerability and that you build it into the plan. And that takes a lot of technical skill sometimes, but it also takes those soft skills of back to basics, asking the right questions, picking up on cues, listening, making note of things that, that you're seeing in the environment. So vulnerability is I think it needs to be, I wouldn't say it's the bedrock, but it's got to be part. It's got to be business as usual, really. It's got to be part of what you do as a financial planner, is having that awareness of vulnerability and knowing how to handle it professionally to ensure the client gets the right outcome. I mean, if you talk about the FCA's guidance, the purpose of that guidance was to really elevate the outcomes for clients in vulnerable circumstances so they're at the same quality level as if they weren't vulnerable. Consumer duty is really about elevating the outcomes across the board. So vulnerability is a key part of what we do from a regulatory point of view, but also from a professional practice point of view.
I think that's so important, as you said, because clients won't realise that they're, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I'm now vulnerable. Or, as you said, it's a circumstance that's sometimes a temporary moment in their life, or it can be longer felt, sure, that's caused that. And that, I think that's where the value of advice comes into its own, doesn't it? Because they could potentially go and try things for themselves, but then they wouldn't have recognised all these other jigsaw pieces, as you've mentioned. They maybe wouldn't recognise that actually they are in a vulnerable circumstance. And that's where actually advice is, for me, pivotal and really, really important. And what we found in our research on the Happiness in Retirement campaign is only 23% of retirees had taken advice. A lot of them had tried to navigate this on their own. So what do you think as an industry we can be doing to try and champion that advice and showing clients why it's so important?
Well, there's a lot of talk about the advice gap. I actually think it's an engagement gap. And one of the reasons I say that is that we haven't got queues of people like you've got queues of people trying to get an appointment for a GP or a dentist. You haven't got queues of people, financial planners. So there's a source of advice, professional advice there, and we need to increase the demand. So which means we've got to try and take down some of the barriers. We've got to try and educate the public. For me, it's about building trust. And one of the drivers, personal motivations for me in suggesting that we started the Financial Vulnerability Taskforce is that I saw it and still see it as an opportunity that if we can demonstrate to the general public that the profession of financial planning is a safe pair of hands when you're in vulnerable circumstances, then it will elevate the way in which we're perceived. If we elevate the way we're perceived, then trust and confidence in the profession rises, and therefore engagement will increase. And if the demand goes up, then the supply will increase as well. It will attract more people into the profession. I mean, the Consumer Duty Alliance have launched the new Talent Alliance as well to really address that, bringing new people into the profession. But we've got to build trust. We've got legacy issues from the past. Something happens in the financial planning world that hits the news, and suddenly we're back to square one. I don't really understand that. And so part of my motivation for working with the Financial Vulnerability Taskforce and the Consumer Duty Alliance is to try and elevate trust and confidence that the public can rightly have in the profession of financial planning.
I think that's amazing to have that as a North Star and an ultimate aim to working towards, because you have to lay down the groundwork and do the groundwork to get there, don't you? Which is what you're doing. Just taking it back, you mentioned earlier on you're the implementer for the FCA, if you like, on a lot of things, particularly vulnerability. I love that. It's the how, isn't it? Because the how, showing or giving examples of the how, or talking to advisors, all that thing, those types of people that are doing the job now is where your value is, isn't it? Sure. In terms of helping them. And how are you finding after those interactions with advisors in that regard on behalf of the Consumer Duty Alliance? How's that going at the moment? How do you see that going over the next few years? Well,
engagement has taken us by surprise, really. The number of people. I mean, it's free to sign up, but so we've got, I don't know where we are now, but it's thousands that have signed up and starting to use the resources. But one of the things that I found very gratifying was the recent conference where we had Nick Hume from the Financial Conduct Authority, and I think there were 9 people from his team there. And in the outbreak sessions or breakout sessions where we got direct engagement with the FCA, the feedback from that, from advisors, was really positive, because it was a genuine opportunity for them to ask those knotty questions and to put forward suggestions directly to the FCA, sometimes on quite nitty-gritty things like sending in the RMA form. But it was also, I think it demonstrated to advisors that the FCA were really keen, or are really keen, on engaging, particularly with small firms, and recognising that there's a lot of good work that's going on in the sector already. And that sort of, I mean, I certainly came away with a feeling that there'd been a step change, and there's now more of an air of collaboration between the regulator, the advice sector, product providers, because if we can get that collaboration and proper engagement, then it can only be good in terms of consumer outcomes and building trust for the profession.
Yeah. And how does it feel to be part of that step change though, Robin? That must feel amazing.
It is amazing. I mean, I joined the profession, I'd say 33 years ago, and it was a completely different culture and different setup then. But one of the things that's always irked me is that we've never quite achieved parity of esteem in the profession. You know, everybody trusts and respects their lawyer, accountant, surveyor, architect. And so that's one of the things that's driving it personally. But it was really gratifying to see that level of engagement, and the sort of, it was very upbeat, and you know, there is a different atmosphere developing in the profession. So I'm really pleased that, you know, that we're having that impact. I mean, in no small way, you know, it's all down to, well, it's all down to, but Keith Richards has played a really important part, because although he's retired, he's working almost full time with meetings and, you know, talking. So he's really driven it forwards, you know, and he should be commended for that, really, you know, and what we've created already. But it's growing every day, it grows, and it's a challenge because we're working pro bono, you know, so trying to balance, you know, our day jobs with, you know, trying to move things forward for the profession is a challenge sometimes.
I think the buzz, I mean, I was there on that day, and the buzz in the room was incredible. And as you said,
Yeah.
it was an event where everybody there really wanted to be part of it, and everybody was so engaged, and it was really great for us to be part of, and definitely something that I felt, you know, in the room on the day, which was brilliant. Final thing, Robin, if you could give other advisors out there one piece of advice to take away, what would it be?
I think recognise that there is a difference, I think, between financial planning and financial advice, and the two work hand in hand. In my own practice, we very much see the financial planning part as the start of the process, for sure. And then the financial advice for us is about implementation. And then in terms of ongoing review, it's then a blend of reviewing the financial planning in light of the change to their circumstances and what's going on in the economy and changing the law. But also it's a review of the financial and investment advice as well. So I think it would be to provide that financial planning. You know, it's referenced in the thematic review about cash flow forecasting and the value of financial planning, as well as, you know, regulated advice. So as I say, I wish you'd have given me notice of that question, but that's what's popped into my mind, is that I think as I've gone through the profession, I was very much a transactional financial advisor, if I'm honest, when I first started. But I started to realise actually what clients really value is the financial planning part of what you do. So to the extent now that we very much focus on financial planning, and then the financial advice for us is really the implementation of the plan.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Well, I think that was a brilliant answer. I don't think you'd know that I'd put you on the spot with that one. So
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Robin. I think that was really insightful. For anybody listening, if you want to see a copy of the Thematic Review checklist, there'll be a link within the synopsis and a link to our happiness campaign as well. But some really brilliant insights. And yeah, thank you for all the work the Consumer Duty Alliance are doing. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.